Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Nelson Wong. I'm a principal engineer on communities at Salesforce.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining today. I'm Chandra. I'm a lead engineer with communities teams.
And today we also have Scott Thomas from our partner Silverline, who's joining us today, and he's going to show us some of the solutions they have built for communities.
All right.
So first of all, our forward-looking statements from our legal department. Basically, just in case we talk about features that are not yet in our products, and please check and see what is our current offering. So today we're going to talk about Lightning components in Lightning bolts. So you might have heard about Lightning bolts quite a few times in this conference, and what it is basically a new framework that we have built for building communities and packaging communities. It's a completely component-based solution. So everything on the page is basically component. So in the community builder, you can drag and drop components to design your community pages, and also you can package them once you build them. And once you build them, you can use them anywhere in any communities. You can also package them and put them up on AppExchange if you want to. So now we're going to show you a couple of demos to show you how you can easily build your Lightning components to customize and to extend your communities for your own use cases. So the first one we're going to build is the Hello World basic component, just to show you how you can easily build components to extend communities. Secondly, we're going to show you how to build community custom pages to use custom record detail components for Salesforce objects. So are you guys ready to build some code? Yeah. Cool. OK, let's get started. Chandra.
All right. Thanks, Nelson, for the introduction. So we'll mostly be coding in Force.com Developer Console. So I'm going to first show how do we get into Force.com Developer Console. So once you're in Lightning Experience, you can click this icon and then click on Developer Console. That's where our code is going to live. So I clicked on Developer Console, and then I have a window open here. Okay, that's where we are going to do most of the coding. Okay, and then before that, I want to just quickly demo what we mean by the Lightning Bolt and the builder, and then how our end demo is going to look. Okay. So this is called Communities Builder, where once you write your components inside Developer Console, once you expose them to be working with the Communities Builder, you can drag drop them. We're going to show a detailed demo on how to do that. And then the end community is going to look something like this. So we have a page there that looks empty, so we're going to fill in a component that we write now. Okay. Okay, so once you're in the Developer Console, we're creating Lightning components. That's why you have to choose a Lightning component file, and then click New. Is it readable in the back of the room? Do I increase the font size? Or? OK, thank you. So new Lightning component. Does you want to explain all these fields?
Yeah, so when you build a Lightning component, it's really reusable in different apps in Salesforce, like our core Salesforce app or other Lightning apps. So if you want the component to be usable in communities, you want to check this checkbox, Lightning Communities page, so that it will automatically make it available for community builders.
All right, great. So let me click Submit and see what's going to happen now. OK? So yeah, go ahead.
Yes, you can see it automatically implements this interface for community available for all page types, which makes it available for community builders.
All right, OK. So let me bring in some code. We're going to talk through all the code, even though we're going to copy paste just to save time. So let me bring in some code, and then we're going to talk through all of this code in a bit. Nelson, you can explain this?
Yeah, as you can see, when you create a component, it's not just one file. So what you're seeing is the .cmp file, which basically contains the markup of your component in the UI. Okay. And on the right-hand side, you can also see there are other files, like the controller file, which is a JavaScript client-side controller for user interactions. And there's a helper file for shared routines, and a style file for your CSS for your component UI. And so on.
OK, so let's add some code into the controller and the and the design file, and then let's bring this component into the builder and then see how this markup is going to translate it into the UI. Okay, so let me quickly copy some basic JavaScript here. Okay, we'll get to it. We'll explain all the code in there in a minute. Okay. All right. Yeah. So you want to explain how this, why we need this design file?
Sure. So the design file is one other file that we need to specify how you want to expose your component in the community builder. Basically, in this case, for a very basic component, we just want to specify the label for the name of the component that appears in the builder.
Okay. So with that, let's go back to builder and see how this component is going to look there. And once you drag it, what's going to happen? Once you create a new component, you have to reload the builder so that builder knows about the component that we just created using this interface. So once the builder reloads, you can see all the components that you just created. Okay.
Yeah, as we mentioned in the community builder, you can drag and drop components, so there's no more like writing, hand coding the whole Visual Force page for your community pages. And also, all the components are reusable so that you can just build once and reuse everywhere.
Great. Okay. So we have pre-created a page for this demo. Right now it's empty, but now I'm going to drag the component that we just created. So you go to the page editor here on the left, right? So that brings in the edit mode of the page. You're actually in the context of builder. So this is for your, community managers or admins in the context of builder where they can drag drop components. So this is not the live community, which we're going to see in a minute, in some time. Okay. So once you're in the page editor, you see a lot of components here that are out of the box that we provide. But if you want to customize as we did just now, you're going to search for that component, and you will find it here, df hello world demo. I just want to emphasize here that the name that you see there is exactly what you give in the label file. That's why it's important that you give a good name to the file, so component, so you can find it easily here. So let me drag this into this region and see what's going to happen. All right, so this markup that we had that Nelson explained now is translated into this UI. Okay.
Yeah. So let's go back to the component files and see what happens here.
Yeah.
So as you can see, this CMP file, we have the markup for the component. It's a very basic component. It has the header tag that has the name, the title of this component, Hello Dreamforce, and there's just a couple buttons below it, and which are styled. We can explain later.
Yeah.
And with this much code, you can already create a component to add your functionality to your community. And you can see that these components are styled, but if you go to the style file, let's see, what do we have in the style file? There's actually no CSS right now. So how did that happen? So Chandra, you want to explain that?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so let me go back to the builder. As you see, when we show the CSS file for this, you haven't seen any CSS there, but the buttons look beautiful. They have rounded corners and all that stuff, right? So now I'm going to explain how we get this. Okay, and before I get to that, I want to explain another important concept in communities that is a little different from developing for Lightning experience. Okay. Since communities are used by people like you and me, like if you're a customer of some insurance company, if they're built on top of communities, we are using it. So the companies want to convey their brand there, not the Salesforce blue or any other color, right? So for that reason, we have the branding capabilities built right into the builder, and then CSS makes it so easy for you to exploit these branding properties into your custom component. So let me show what I mean by that. Right, so now I choose a red color brand for my another company, right? So everything changed into red, including the components that you wrote, okay? But you can see that the Hello Dreamforce is still black. I mean, why is it still black? So let's try to fix it, right? So We're going to get into how these colors that you choose on the left is being translated into the UI in a bit. But so let's get the color working for the header there and make sure now it's actually orange or green based on what you choose on the left. Okay. So let's go back to the coding again. I'm going to paste some basic CSS here. Basically, it's saying, the H2 in this component has to get this color. But you see that there's some, new syntax that's not like, out of the box CSS syntax here, right? So it is saying T of color text brand. Let's go back, see our demo, and then come back and see how this T of color text brand works. Okay, so let's go back to Builder. And actually, I need to switch pages so that, it is not cached. So let me come back to DF demo. The black header now has changed to orange. So if you choose something else here, like a green, it's going to change, okay? So even though it's too bright, but yeah. So let's understand how this mapping works and what do we mean by design tokens here quickly, okay? So we have documented how the left-hand side branding that you see in the community builder gets translated into CSS. As you can see, in the builder, this says action color here, and in the documentation here, we have action color, and then these are the tokens. So these tokens, imagine them as dynamic values, right? So in CSS, if you say color red, it's always going to be color red. So if you write a lightning component with color red, and then you give it to somebody whose brand color is blue, I mean, they wouldn't use it because their brand color is blue. So all the colors that you see in the builder are mapped to some design tokens. So in this case, I'm using color text brand as the design token, right? So Lightning Bolt framework automatically fills in everything that you need the moment you use this simple token here. Similarly with all the other tokens as well that are documented in this place, okay? So you can go to this page and see what are all the tokens that you can use. Quickly, let me switch context and explain how the buttons are working, okay? So the header is working just because, the color is using a simple token. But as Nelson has said, we have no CSS, but still the buttons are looking beautiful with rounded corners. They have the colors and everything in there, okay? So let me quickly explain how this works. So the Lightning design system, you might have attended some sessions on this. It's basically a CSS library that we Salesforce built. The main thing about Community's Lightning Bolt platform is that SLDS is baked into the platform. So you don't have to bring in SLDS on your own. And not only that, the other important thing is that all the branding works for you, right? So if you come back to the code here, all I said for this button was this SLDS button and SLDS button -- brand. The moment you said -- brand, it's going to map to some token that we have seen, and then it's going to magically work. So again, just to illustrate the point, I'm going to choose this. You see that both buttons have changed their styles without you writing single line of CSS. That's the power of the platform, because we have SLDS and branding coupled together that's baked into the Lightning Bolt framework.
Very cool. So cool. So it's basic component is styled. There's a couple of buttons. Let's see what they can do. So usually when you build components, you want it to be interactive so that the user can interact with it, to do something with it. So now let's see if we can click on these buttons to take you to a different page, for example.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so now let's click on this button. Nelson is going to talk about how that code works. But once I clicked on that button, you see that I'm loading a record detail, right? Okay, let me switch back to the code. And yeah, Nelson, you can walk through the code.
So this is just a basic example of navigation between pages in communities. And what we added is the code to handle the click event for the button. Let's go back to the CMP file. We have added this click handler, which specifies c.navigate to product detail. And what is that? That is just an expression to specify our controller actions. So controller actions are just functions in our controllers. So C just denotes the controller. And in this function, we just have the code to navigate to the S-object page. So all the page navigation in communities are based on firing of events. So in this case, we want to go to the record detail page, which requires us to fire the navigate to S-object event. And this event takes a param, which is the record ID to specify which record we want to navigate to. And with that, we are able to navigate to this product detailed page.
Great. Okay. So with that, I'm going to close these component, and then now we're going to get into the another demo with some advanced stuff. Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So that's very good. We can show record detail page, which looks like the standard Salesforce record details with our own out-of-the-box components. But one typical use case is to customize your own record detail pages for your own Salesforce objects. And now we're going to show you how you can do that.
All right, great. So now let's customize this because this doesn't look like product detail page. These are out of the box UI. Okay. So now I'm going to copy paste quite a bit of code, but we'll again walk through all the code quickly. So now again, I'm going to come to new and then Lightning component. Let's call it product detail demo. All right. So again, you choose Lightning communities page and submit. Okay. So now you see that Lightning has generated a bunch of files. So we have this CMP. Also, you want to explain?
Yeah, so as you can see, this CMP, again, we have the markup for this component. And one main difference in this component from the previous one is that we specify the controller for this component. So what we specify in this controller is actually a server-side controller. Server-side controllers allow you to interact with Salesforce data on server side or add your own custom logic on server side. And they are just Apex classes. So if you're familiar with Visual Force development, you'll probably be familiar with Apex classes. Apex classes is our own programming language you can use to run your own logic and to use our APIs on the server side.
Okay. So I'm going to quickly open that Apex class that we have pre-written yeah.
So since this is a record detail component, what we want to do is we want to fetch data for the record on server side and load it to the client side to display to the user. And what we have here in this Apex class is one simple method to get the product by its ID, taking in the ID of the product. And it's just calling a SOQL query to return the product record based on this ID. And if you notice, above this method, we have this annotation or enabled, which allows this method to be called from the UI.
Yeah, okay. So let's switch back to the CMP again.
Yeah, so this component has a couple of attributes. The first one is the product ID that specifies which product we want to load in this component. And secondly, we have the product attribute, which will contain the details of this product record. And below it, we have the markup for displaying the detail fields for this product record. And also, you can see that above it, we have the Init event handler. So Init is just basically a standard event that is fired against any component. For you to initialize your component, typically, you might want to load the data to show in the component. So in this case, we're handling this event in this component.
Great. So let's set up the controller and helper quickly, and we'll go through the code. Okay. Yeah.
So in this doInit function in the controller, what we're doing is basically we're calling a helper function, which is shared logic, to load the data for this component. Let's go into the helper function and see how it looks like. So the helper function load data, basically what it does is it gets the server-side controller method, basically by getting c.getProductById, which is the method you saw in the Apex class. And with this controller action, we set the parameters. It takes in the product ID. We can get it from the component attribute. And we also set a callback for this action call. so that when the action comes back to the client side, we can set it to the UI. And basically, we just set it to the v.product, which specifies the product attribute in this component.
Yeah. Great. OK. So again, as we did in the previous example, I'm going to add a design file. But this design file has something new that we haven't seen in the first demo. OK. So now let's try to understand what is that. So label is, as you have seen, it exposes this label into the builder so people can easily search. And Nelson is going to explain what is this design attribute.
Yeah, these attributes are basically what attributes you want to expose in the builder for the user to customize your component. In this case, we want to take in a record ID for this component so that we can load the specific record for this component. And as you see, we also specify the label for this attribute and the default value for this attribute. So this default value is an expression which specifies the record ID for that page. We can explain this further later on. But let's go see how this component looks like.
Great. So let me reload the builder because we just created a new component while it reloads. Again, so it has a CMP. It is calling into Apex controller to get data. It has a client-side controller. When the component is initialized, it gets here and then loads the data. And then once the data is loaded, it's going to update an attribute, and then the DOM gets updated. Okay? So that's the overall flow. Typically, this is the pattern for most of the Lightning components. Okay? So now that the builder has loaded, it knows about the component that we just created. So here you can choose all the pages, your custom pages, as well as out-of-the-box pages. So since we are overriding a page for product detail, I'm going to just choose Cafe product detail.
Yeah, we have already pre-created this custom page for the product object in your in Salesforce. So basically, in the community builder, you can create your custom pages which are linked to objects. So when it's linked to objects, they will automatically be loaded when this kind of object is loaded.
Okay. Yeah, we have pre-created that, and then the page has loaded, right? As we said, you get into the page editor. I want to delete these components because I want to add the component that we just created and see how it looks. Okay. So let me delete these. And then once you deleted them, you can search here. And then you see that the Cafe product demo detail thing I just created is here. So once you drag drop, let's see what's going to happen. Okay. So, yeah, go ahead.
So as you can see, we have built a very custom component that shows some simple fields on this record. So it's basically just a demo to show how you can write your component to show your record detail. You can design your component in whichever way that you want to fit your use cases. And this is just an example to show you how to load the data in the record and show it in a custom component. So now let's go back to the controller and see how we can make it better. So since this component is loading data, for performance reasons, we want to cache the data so that the next time you load the component, you don't have to get the data again, right? So in this controller call, we can just simply add set storable to the action. So when this action is invoked, the data is going to be cached, and next time when you go back and load this component, the data is already there. It doesn't have to load it from the server again.
Okay. Let's see we have been in the builder for a while, so let's see how the end user is going to experience all this once you publish. So while it's publishing, Nelson can explain what do we mean by publishing, in fact.
Yeah, so all the editing that you have done in the community builder is basically in draft mode. So the end user will not see your changes just yet until you publish your changes. So now Chandra is publishing this community. Once it's published, it will be live to your community, so your end user will be able to see your changes.
Okay, it's taking a bit. Usually it shouldn't be this long. Once it publishes, we're going to demo one more thing that Nelson mentioned. What do we mean by this expression syntax? And is our component only going to work with one record detail? No, it's going to work with any record detail, and we're going to demo how exactly this syntax is helping with that. Okay. Should, yeah. It's published. So now that it's published, I can go to, imagine I'm a live community customer. I can reload this page, and yeah, we have our Hello World component. You click on that, you're going to see our, the component that we just wrote. And then you can also notice that the image that you saw previously was different from this. That's because the record ID that we are using is different here. And let me go back to the builder and explain how this record ID is patched into the live component, okay? So let's go back to the builder. All right. So once I choose this component in the design mode, you see that there is this syntax called, bang record ID. So how is it getting patched? So in the live mode, you see that the record ID is actually, in the URL. So the Lightning Bolt platform fills that in.
Mm-hmm. So for record detail pages, we have a standard parameter in the URL, which is the record ID. So with that expression, you can easily specify the record ID that you want to pass into your component. So usually when you build record detail pages, you don't want to build it for one specific record, right? So you want to build it for the same types of multiple records that are of the same type. So that's why we have this parameter from the URL you can pass into your component, so that at runtime, the component will know which record we want to load in the component based on the URL.
All right, those are the demos. You want to summarize?
So very cool. So in not a lot of coding, we have shown you how you can build components to extend and customize your communities, and also for your typical use cases to extend custom object or any Salesforce objects detail pages for your own requirements. So now we're very happy to have Scott Thomas from our partner Silverline, who's going to show us some of the cool components they have built for communities.
Thanks. I just wanted to say we're a member of the initial group that's put together our Lightning Bolt community templates. And so what that is we're able to take the components that we build and code that we produce and the design templates that we have and the layouts and package all that together into an installable Bolt package that you can install into a community and deliver on a use case. So we at Silverline are experts in financial services and healthcare. We also have App Exchange product called Calendar Anything. We heard a lot about people wanting to have a self-service scheduling community to be able to book an appointment online. And so that's what we built in our Lightning Bolt community template. So what I'm going to show you here is our community. You can see it looks a lot different than the typical Napili template. We have sort of a background image. What I want to talk about is what are the elements that are making this up? Which are the components that we've built to sort of put this together? So up at the top, we built a login component. That's a custom Lightning component that we built. This main section here, that's sort of our scheduling engine, right, where I can pick a provider. Let me just refresh my page here for a second. Okay, so I could pick a provider, I can choose a facility, I can choose an appointment type, and that's going to present me with a list of options that I can come through, and I can select an appointment and fill out, my information to create an appointment here. So this component here is actually a React.js component that we built as part of other work that we have been doing related to scheduling. So not everything that you include in your community has to be a native Lightning component. We have a combination of lots of different elements in our Lightning Bolt community template, including native Lightning components that we've built along the lines of what Nelson and Chandra were showing. We have this React.js component that we have here that we were able to reuse, and we're using a Visualforce component that's a pilot program, I believe, in the Winter 17 to be able to expose that within a community. And then we also built another Lightning component here, which we call the section component. And we use this a number of different ways. So this is a way that you can get sort of that modern looking website where you can have different sections. We have some CSS styling overrides like they were showing that allow for the full bleed of the page in our template that we built. So actually I have multiple versions of this section component that we built on this page. So I have this one here that's just showing some text. I have this one here that's showing a heading and these icons. with some text, and then I have different versions of it. Each one of these is its own version of that section component, and I'm pointing to some images here, and I'm including some text, and we have various component properties that allow us to handle some of the font sizing that we use and the alignment. So you can see we're able to put together an interesting looking page very simply just by dragging multiple different versions of that section component, setting the background color, populating it with text, and it looks really good. So here's a couple of different options that we have with alignment. You can see, depending upon what I do, I can make it look different ways. And of course, they're responsive. So if I shrink my page, they're going to automatically, adjust for an appropriate mobile experience. So that component, we talked about doing that when we were talking about putting this session together. So it took us the better part of a week just kind of defining what the requirements were and putting that together to be able to turn that around. And we have a really powerful, very cool component here. I'm going to show you just another couple of pages here. Let me just make sure I get my login appropriately. Okay, so this, after I had scheduled that appointment, I would have gotten an appointment confirmation, and this Lightning Bolt community template would even send me an invitation to log into my community. So then I would come in as a patient. So right now we're looking at the patient page. So when I log in as the patient, this is a page variation, so we didn't really talk about that, but when you log in within the community builder, you can set up different page variations based on your profile. So when I'm coming in unauthenticated like I was at first, I wasn't logged in, I can just book my appointment and I have a particular home page. When I come in as a patient, I have a different home page, and this is using a different layout. We have our same login component up at the top in this heading region that we created. That shows who's logged in. And then I have a different design, a different content layout, right, that defines the background images and the styling of this page. It also creates these 2-column regions here. So this is a 3-column content layout. It has a heading and then 2 columns here at the top. And what I have in here are another collection of different components that we include. So again, reusing the same login component up at the top. And then here, we have a component that we call RSVP. And this is a component that we built and published to the App Exchange onto the Component Exchange. So there's a wide variety of components that are available out on the App Exchange that you can incorporate into your community. We did some work to this one to make sure that it could be community aware, because right now I'm logged in as a community user. And if I click on this RSVP, you can see here, it's just going to register me for that. Right, so now this is showing various events with a capacity, and I can click on that and it registers my community user behind the scenes with Salesforce Workflow. I can do what I need to do to respond to that. So this is an example of the fact that you can use components that are available out on the App Exchange as well to populate your community. This is an example of that scheduling component that I had on the home page, just in a different context. Here it knows I'm logged in, and if I schedule an appointment, it's not going to prompt me with that form. It's just going to schedule that appointment for me as the logged in user. So the component is aware of its context. And this is just one more component that we have that's we call it our object list. You point it to an object. You control the fields that show up with field sets. You can have it set to be collapsed or expanded. It carries the styles and the colors through. And we did some work to this one again to be able to say, if I'm logged in as a community user, show me all the appointment records where the contact user, right, that's related to my community user is on that appointment. So we had to do some special work there to make our components community aware, but this is just another example. There's 2 instances of this showing upcoming appointments with particular filter criteria, and another one showing my appointment history, and I have them operating different ways. So again, these are just some examples, and here finally, we have a form. This is another React.js component, so you can see, you can piece together lots of different elements to produce a very compelling, comprehensive page.
Very cool. So with all these customization capabilities and solutions that our partners have built, there's really a lot of different opportunities. You can implement your own custom communities in the way that you want it. So now we have a little bit of like a minute left. We can take any questions you have. Please use the mic over there in the middle.
How do you version? What's the life cycle of publishing and versioning your backtracking changes?
So the question is, how do you version your changes in communities? So basically, our versioning right now is draft and publish. So in the draft mode, it's basically not live changes. So once you publish your changes, it will go live and go to your end users. We also are looking for other enhancements to keep track of change histories and things like that, but it's in our long-term plans.
Okay.
Thank you.
So if you use one of the Lightning Bolt templates, are they customizable if you wanted to add your own tab? And
Yes, definitely.
Yes.
So with our custom solutions from our partners, you can get a pre-built community, but you can also customize it in the way that you want. Using our components, we have out-of-the-box custom tab components or rich text components. You can add your own content or your own different customization that you want on your community pages. So it's definitely very flexible.
okay, and sorry, one more question. Can you build your own Lightning Bolt templates?
Yes, you can. So it's just like how our partners build our Lightning Bolt templates. You can build your template, you can package it, and put it up on App Exchange if you want, and share it if you want. That's definitely possible.
It's GA now? You
It's
can-
GA in winter 17.
Okay.
So one last question.
And we'll be here after the session. If you guys have more, we'll be off the stage, but we can chat. But yeah, we'll take questions. One more.
How did you implement a React component, since I thought it wasn't possible because of Locker service?
Well, in this case, we used a Visualforce component that's available for the community. So that's a Visualforce page that we're showing. But it is possible, I believe, to use other frameworks within Microservice. Sometimes you have to make modifications to the base code. But these developers could tell you more about that after the session, I'm sure.
Okay, with that, thank you very much for coming to our session. And,
Thank you.
Any more questions?